This is the true story of David and Goliath. Not just a children's tale that we learn in Sunday school, but rather a scriptural account of the giant-sized faith that God used to defeat a giant. We will embark on this immersive journey, learning how to combat overwhelming odds with an unwavering belief in God's promises. In Hebrews 11:6 it states, "Without faith it is impossible to please God." In this episode, we will delve into the power of faith that can transform the seemingly impossible into a resounding victory in your life today. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. You'll also want to check out this video's study guide. Click the link in the description to download it for free. But without further ado, let's take an in-depth look at the true underdog story of David and Goliath. Part 1. The setting of the stage, more than just a battlefield. The Valley of Elah. Imagine it with me for a moment. Not just a geographical location marked on an ancient map, but a crucible where two opposing forces have converged, embodying a conflict far deeper than mere territorial dispute. On one side, the Philistines, a formidable, well-equipped army, their presence a tangible threat to the peace and security of Israel. Their champion, Goliath of Gath, a figure of immense stature and terrifying reputation, stands as the embodiment of their strength, his challenge echoing through the valley, a taunt that chips away at the morale of Saul's army. For 40 long days, this scene has played out, a stalemate born of fear. The seasoned soldiers of Israel, men who had likely faced battles before, are paralyzed, their courage seemingly dissolved by the sheer presence of this giant. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they can find someone to defeat Goliath, the Philistines will surrender and serve Israel. However, if Israel's champion loses to Goliath, then the Israelites will become slaves to the Philistines. Every moment of the rest of their lives is riding on this one encounter. But the odds seem insurmountable. It is almost certain that no matter which warrior they choose, the inevitable outcome is a life of slavery. This extended period of inaction speaks volumes. It highlights how the natural realm, the overwhelming physical reality of the opposition, can so easily grip our hearts and minds, causing us to forget the very faith that should be our first line of defense. Consider the parallels in our own lives. How often do we find ourselves facing situations that appear insurmountable? A daunting financial challenge, a persistent health issue, a seemingly unbreakable relational conflict, a career obstacle that looms large and intimidating. These are our modern-day Goliaths, their shadows stretching long and cold across our paths, threatening to immobilize us with doubt and fear. The same doubt and fear that is the opposite of faith and can block the blessings of God. Just like the army of Israel, we can become so fixated on the size and strength of the problem that we lose sight of the ultimate power that resides within us through our relationship with God. The natural reaction in such moments is to rely on human strength, on worldly wisdom, on the resources and strategies that seem logical and tangible. Therefore, Saul the king likely considered his military might, the experience of his soldiers, and perhaps even sought counsel from his advisors. Yet, for 40 days, these natural means proved insufficient. Why? Because the battle they faced was not merely physical, it was a spiritual one. Goliath's taunts were not just directed at the army of Israel, but at the very God they served, at the covenant they held. He was challenging the power and the faithfulness of Jehovah. This is a crucial understanding for us as believers in the word of faith. Our battles are often fought in the spiritual realm, before they manifest in the physical. The giants we face derive their power not just from their inherent strength, but from the fear and doubt they sow in our hearts. The Valley of Elah, therefore, is not just a battlefield. It is a stage upon which the power of belief, or the lack thereof, is about to be dramatically displayed. It is a place where the limitations of human strength will be starkly contrasted with the boundless potential that lies within those who dare to trust in the living God. Now pause here. Reflect on the valleys of Elah you might be facing in your own life. What giants are taunting you, and what has been your initial response? Have you been focusing on the size of the giant or the size of your God? Take a moment to consider this before we move on to the arrival of the unlikely champion. Part 2. The unlikely arrival, faith in humble garb. Goliath poses the largest threat, and thus imposes the greatest fear that likely anyone in the Israelite army ever faced. That presence of fear blocks the faith needed for God's miracles. This is the same fear that caused Peter to sink after being the only man other than Jesus to walk on water. Matthew 14:29. God needs to find someone who isn't afraid of Goliath. Therefore, into this atmosphere of fear and stalemate steps David, a young shepherd boy, seemingly an insignificant figure amidst the backdrop of war. He arrives not as a seasoned warrior, clad in armor and eager for battle, but as a messenger, sent by his father Jesse to bring provisions to his brothers serving in Saul's army and to inquire about their well-being. In the natural realm, David's arrival would have barely registered. He was an errand boy, a youth with no military experience, his hands more accustomed to tending sheep than wielding a sword. Yet it is often in the seemingly ordinary and unexpected that God's extraordinary power is revealed. So David's journey to the Valley of Elah was not a random occurrence. It was a divinely orchestrated moment, a collision of human circumstance and God's sovereign plan. While Saul and his army were consumed by the daunting physical presence of Goliath, God was preparing to demonstrate his power through someone whose heart was attuned to him, someone whose faith was not intimidated by outward appearances. Consider the contrast. Saul, the king, the leader of the nation, a man chosen by God, is paralyzed by fear. His focus is entirely on the natural realm, on the seemingly invincible strength of Goliath. David, on the other hand, arrives with a heart full of simple obedience and a deep-seated trust in God. His encounters with lions and bears while protecting his father's flock had forged in him a confidence that God was his deliverer, a reality that transcended the immediate threat before him. This speaks volumes to us about where true strength lies. It is not always found in physical prowess, in worldly experience, or in human might. True strength, the kind that overcomes seemingly insurmountable obstacles, is rooted in an unwavering faith in God's ability to act on our behalf. David's faith had cultivated into a deep-seated trust that would now rise to meet this monumental challenge. Therefore, when David hears Goliath's defiant taunts, his reaction is markedly different from that of the seasoned soldiers. They are filled with fear. He is filled with righteous indignation. Goliath's words are not just an insult to the army of Israel. They are a direct affront to the living God. David's question in 1 Samuel 17:26, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" reveals the core of his perspective. His focus is not on Goliath's size, but on Goliath's audacity in challenging the power and authority of Jehovah. This shift in perspective is critical. Where others saw an unconquerable giant, David saw an uncircumcised Philistine, someone outside the covenant, someone who had no right to stand in defiance of God's chosen people and their God. His faith immediately recontextualized the situation, moving it from a purely physical confrontation to a spiritual battle where God's honor was at stake. David's initial encounter with Saul further highlights this contrast. Saul, still trapped in the natural realm, attempts to dissuade David in 1 Samuel 17:33, pointing to his youth and inexperience. "You are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." Saul's assessment is based purely on outward appearances and worldly standards. He cannot comprehend the source of David's confidence. David's response in 1 Samuel 17:37, recounting his past victories over the lion and the bear, is not a boast in his own strength, but a testament to God's faithfulness. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David's faith was in God's consistent power and love. Pause here and reflect on the Goliaths you currently face. Are you viewing them through the lens of your own limitations or through the lens of God's limitless power? Consider the past instances where God has intervened in your life. Can those experiences bolster your faith for the present battle? Take a moment to ponder this before we witness David's bold declaration of faith. Part 3, the bold declaration, faith that speaks victory. So Saul, Though initially skeptical, eventually relents, perhaps out of desperation or a flicker of hope sparked by David's unwavering conviction. He offers David his own armor, a symbol of earthly protection and military might. But David, after trying it on, finds it cumbersome and ill-fitting. "I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them," he declares. David recognizes that his strength does not lie in the armaments of the world, in the strategies and resources that human wisdom dictates. He chooses to rely on the armor he has tested and proven true in the battles of his life, his faith in the living God and the simple tools he is skilled in using. He selects 5 smooth stones from the brook, a seemingly insignificant arsenal against a heavily armed giant. These stones were not chosen randomly. The number 5 in Scripture often signifies grace and redemption. David understood that his victory would be an act of God's grace, a demonstration of his redemptive power. His sling, a tool he had used to protect his flock, now becomes an instrument of divine purpose. As David approaches Goliath, the giant is contemptuous, mocking his youth and apparent lack of weaponry. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" In 1 Samuel 17, verse 43, Goliath's words are dripping with arrogance and a complete underestimation of the true power standing before him. He sees only a boy with a sling, failing to perceive the unwavering faith that burns within David's heart and the divine authority that backs him. This is a critical point for us. The world, the natural realm, will often scoff at our faith, dismissing it as naive or impractical in the face of seemingly insurmountable problems. The Goliaths in our lives will taunt us with their size and strength, questioning the efficacy of our belief in God. But like David, our response must be rooted in a deeper understanding of who our God is and the power he has entrusted to us through faith. David's response to Goliath's taunts is not one of fear or intimidation, but a bold declaration of faith and a prophetic pronouncement of victory. David says in verse 45, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Notice the power in David's words. He acknowledges Goliath's natural weaponry, but immediately contrasts it with the supernatural power he wields, the very name of the Lord of hosts. This is a powerful principle of the word of faith, speaking forth what God has promised, declaring victory before it is seen in the natural realm. David's words are not just wishful thinking. They are a confident assertion of God's faithfulness and ability to act. He continues, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." David's declaration is filled with purpose and a clear understanding of the spiritual implications of this battle. He uses his faith in an outward display with a declaration of what is about to happen for the whole world to see. His faith is not just for personal victory, it is for the glory of God and the advancement of his kingdom. This challenges us to examine the motives behind our own faith. Are we seeking God only for personal gain and comfort, or are we also driven by a desire to see his power manifested in our lives so that others may come to know him? David's faith had a kingdom focus, a desire to see God glorified in the eyes of all. His final words to Goliath in 1 Samuel 17:47 are a powerful summation of the difference between their reliance, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. David understood that the victory was not his to claim through his own strength or skill, but God's to bestow. He recognized that the ultimate power resided with Jehovah, and his role was to be a vessel through which that power could be manifested. Pause here and reflect on the boldness of David's declaration. Do you speak with that same level of conviction in the face of your own giants? Are your words filled with faith and a confident expectation of God's intervention? Take a moment to consider the power of your words and how they align with God's promises before we witness the swift and decisive act of faith. Part 4. The swift act of faith, when belief meets action. With his bold declaration echoing across the valley, David doesn't hesitate. His faith is not passive, it is active and decisive. Therefore, he runs towards Goliath, a seemingly reckless act in the eyes of the natural observer. This running towards the giant is a powerful visual representation of faith in action. It signifies a refusal to be intimidated by the outward appearance of the enemy, a determination to engage the challenge head-on, trusting in God's promised victory. It stands in stark contrast to the 40 days of fearful inaction by Saul's army. Where they retreated in their hearts, David advanced in faith. Reaching into his shepherd's bag, he retrieves one of the smooth stones. This simple, unassuming object, chosen not for its size or sharpness, but for its potential in the hand of faith, becomes the instrument of Goliath's downfall. With practiced skill honed from years of protecting his flock, David places the stone in his sling. The sling itself is a significant detail. It was not a weapon of sophisticated warfare, but a tool of a humble shepherd. It represents how God can use the seemingly insignificant and ordinary aspects of our lives, our talents, our experiences, when consecrated by faith, to accomplish extraordinary things. What might seem like a minor skill or a past experience could be precisely what God intends to use to overcome the giants in our present circumstances. With focused intention and unwavering trust, David whirls the sling. Imagine the scene, the small stone gaining momentum, propelled by the force of David's belief, cutting through the air towards its target. His aim is true, guided not by human skill alone, but by the hand of God. The stone strikes Goliath squarely on the forehead, piercing through his helmet and sinking deep. The seemingly invincible giant, the terror of Israel, stumbles and then crashes to the ground, his immense frame collapsing under the impact of a small stone wielded by a boy filled with faith. The silence that must have followed this moment would have been deafening. The Philistines, who moments before stood confident in their champion, are now witnesses to his stunning defeat at the hands of someone they had dismissed as insignificant. The paralyzed army of Israel, who had cowered in fear for 40 days, now see their enemy vanquished, not by their might, but by the power of their God working through an unlikely vessel. David doesn't stop there. He runs to the fallen giant, and using Goliath's own sword, a weapon far too large and heavy for him to wield in conventional combat, he cuts off his head. This decisive act serves as undeniable proof of Goliath's defeat, and a powerful symbol of the complete and utter victory that faith in God brings. The very weapon that represented the enemy's strength becomes the instrument of his ultimate destruction. This act underscores a profound truth. The very things the enemy uses to intimidate and defeat us can often be turned against him when we operate in faith. The challenges and obstacles we face can become the very stepping stones to our victory and the enemy's demise. The reaction of the Philistine army is immediate and predictable. They flee in terror. The sudden and decisive defeat of their seemingly invincible champion shatters their confidence and throws their ranks into disarray. The once fearful army of Israel, now emboldened by the demonstration of God's power, rises up and pursues their fleeing enemies, securing a complete and resounding victory. The victory in the Valley of Elah was not just David's victory, it was Israel's victory, and more importantly, it was God's victory. It was a powerful testament to his faithfulness, his power, and his willingness to use those who place their trust in him, regardless of their outward appearance or perceived limitations. Pause here and reflect on the swiftness and decisiveness of David's action. How often do we hesitate or delay in acting on the faith that God has placed in our hearts? What stones has God placed in your hand, seemingly insignificant tools that, when wielded in faith, can bring down the giants in your life? Take a moment to consider how you can move from bold declaration to decisive action in your own battles of faith. Part 5, The Enduring Legacy, Faith that Echoes Through Time. The story of David and Goliath transcends a single historical event. It resonates through the ages as a timeless archetype of faith, triumphing over seemingly insurmountable odds. Its enduring legacy lies in the profound principles it reveals about the nature of faith, the character of God, and the potential that resides within every believer, regardless of their background or perceived limitations. One of the most significant takeaways is the understanding that true strength is not found in physical might or worldly resources, but in an unwavering reliance on the power of God. Goliath, with his imposing stature and formidable weaponry, represented the pinnacle of human strength and military prowess. Yet he was ultimately defeated by a youth armed with nothing more than a sling and a profound trust in the Lord. This serves as a powerful reminder that in our own battles, our confidence should not be in our own abilities or the resources we possess, but in the limitless power of the God who fights for us. Furthermore, the story underscores the importance of perspective. While Saul and his army were paralyzed by the size of Goliath, David's focus was on the defiance of Goliath against the living God. This shift in perspective is crucial. When we fixate on the magnitude of our problems, they can become overwhelming. But when we reframe our challenges in light of God's sovereignty and power, they diminish in significance. Our Goliaths are ultimately finite in the face of an infinite God. Moreover, David's bold declaration of faith before the battle is a vital lesson for us. His words were not mere wishful thinking. They were a prophetic pronouncement of the victory that he believed God would bring. The word of faith emphasizes the power of speaking forth God's promises and declaring victory based on his word. David's example encourages us to articulate our faith, to speak life and victory over our situations, aligning our words with God's intended outcome. The seemingly insignificant tools David used, 5 smooth stones and a shepherd's sling, carry a powerful message. God often chooses the weak things of the world to confound the mighty. 1 Corinthians 1:27. Our seemingly ordinary talents, experiences, and resources, when consecrated to God and used in faith, can become instruments of extraordinary impact. We should never underestimate what God can do through the seemingly small things in our lives. Finally, the ultimate outcome of the battle underscores that the victory belongs to the Lord. David recognized that he was merely a vessel through whom God's power was manifested. Our role in our battles of faith is to trust and obey, to step out in confidence, knowing that the ultimate victory is secured by God himself. The story of David and Goliath continues to inspire and encourage believers across the globe because it speaks to the core of our faith. That with God, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. Let this timeless narrative serve as a constant encouragement to stand firm in your faith, to speak boldly God's promises, and to step out with confidence, knowing that the battle belongs to the Lord, and he will indeed give you the victory. If you're not subscribed to our channel, you may never see us again. If you are, then congratulations. We'll be here anytime you need an uplifting story about God's faith and love.